Well, welcome everyone back to a second video working with this particular image, Saddleback Ridge. So we saw you saw the monochromatic start to this painting. Now it's time to start in with the color being added over the top of this monochromatic start. The monochromatic start was a way of taking care of drawing in value first, and then I can worry about color later. And oil painting allows me that luxury. Other mediums not so much, like watercolor, but with oil painting it allows me that. So it'll be interesting to see what changes as we go through this, what I paint differently as a result of painting in color. You will see some changes that will occur, and hopefully it'll be instructive and helpful for you. But like my watercolor paintings with this oil painting, I'm also painting the most distant elements first. I'm laying in the most distant parts of that sky. So in doing this, especially the way I'm doing it, you could say that I've got a vision in mind, something I want to accomplish here. And that is a sense of the late afternoon or early evening light. So the sky behind everything is kind of starting to turn yellow. And I've got this big heavy cloud bank that will be hanging over above it. A thunderstorm rolling by, has laid down some rain, and that's kind of the story I'm trying to tell, and what you're seeing as this painting comes together. So the colors that I'm using for painting the local color over the top are actually no different from the colors that I used to paint that monochromatic start. Simple red, yellow, and blue. That's all I've got down there. Naphtha red light, cadmium yellow light, and in this case I'm using ultramarine blue. Sometimes I may change that to not cerulean but Prussian blue, depending on what I want to do with it. And then I'm working only with the addition of white to the painting, to the colors, in order to give some opacity and more presence to the colors that I have. So that's what's going on in the beginning here. This action back and forth, kind of almost scrubbing back and forth with my brush, is just because my layer of paint here is fairly consistent from one edge to the next. That I'm almost doing wall style painting here, if you will. And that's really not the way to do painting, especially when you get into detail. You'll see how my strokes and my passages of laying down color will change. But right now I'm just kind of getting that paint scrubbed in there. You'll also see that as I'm painting the sky that I won't paint all of it. In fact, you will be able to see throughout the painting little bits and pieces of that monochromatic start peeking out from underneath. So it's a foundation, and it's going to remain a significant part of the painting and the kind of visual presence that it will have, even though I am basically restarting or repainting the whole thing all over again with this more full color added to it. In that sky, as I change color from one to the other, or the value changes, I'm saying that the light is different, that there's not as much light shining in this portion as opposed to the other portion. So I am painting light as I paint this, even though I'm working with physical paint. The palette knife became important to me years ago, and I had to learn how to use it. It's something that I've seen overused in some paintings, in my opinion, and yet underused or not used at all when perhaps it could have been the perfect tool for the job. So I really like the way that the palette knife lays down paint and leaves evidence of a different tool that made it. And I like the variety that that brings in. Of course, variety was the thing that we really talked about in the first video of this painting. I talked a great deal about variety. In fact, I had up on the screen a scribble rendering exercise that I take my students through, and I have them do this scribble rendering as a way of not rendering anything, keeping it totally abstract, but taking the time to lay in just as much variety of textures and values, edges, just whatever in terms of variety one can put into the making of an image just with graphite. Well, here I'm just using brush or palette knife with paint. In the monochromatic start, I just had one color. Here in this finished version of this painting, I now have several colors to work with as I'm making it. So one little flick of the brush one direction may say one thing. One little flick of the brush in another direction may say something else. It is experience in having painted the landscape many, many times that helps me to know what I want to do when I get going in these paintings. And so the history, the memory, the experience that I've had with doing this becomes an important part of my process as I go from one painting to the next, as I develop what is the overall body of my work as an artist. Well, okay. At this point, I think I will go ahead and turn you over to some music, let you enjoy that for a little bit while the painting process finishes up. Well, okay. I hope that's been beneficial for you to see the way that I work in my oil paintings here, especially as I'm adding color over the top of the monochromatic start. Now there are places where you can still see some of the underpainting coming through. I hope you notice that, and I hope you consider that that can still remain a viable part of the painting. Now what you see going on here is I'm changing the focal point. Remember that in the monochromatic start I talked about the developing focal point being in the middle on the left side. Well, now I've moved it down to the lower right with the addition of that growing pine tree growing as I'm painting it. I'm laying down the paint quite physically thick, and I'm calling attention to that, and I've decided in the spur of the moment that this is our this is now going to be our focal point for the painting, and then you move up from there to the ridge up on top. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole painting in a nutshell, if you will. And I hope that you can use this in your own work and consider possibilities for yourself. Just a few last touches. And here we have the final painting. Hope you can see clearly the monochromatic undertone coming through. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Go out, have some fun painting yourself, and see what you come up with.